Alright guys, so I thought it might be cool since so many people in our D&D group uh, haven't been able to show up recently that it would be cool to give you guys a recap for those people who haven't come to the last two sessions. If they do come again, um, they will be caught up on what has happened while they were gone. And we won't have to like explain it when they get back. And chances are, whenever that happens, I think just details get left out and people get kind of lost and don't really have a good idea about what's going on in the current session. So I thought I'd just kind of go back to that. I'll just start by kind of quickly recapping what happened the session before last session. So that session, I believe it was just me as the DM, Thomas as Aaron the Eldridge Knight, Tiare as Althaea the half-elf druid, and Alex as Alexander Cloudwalker the wizard. So we left off, I believe, when everyone was last there in the hallway, and you guys were fighting wargs and one orc who was sort of commanding them. And we ended the session right when you had just defeated those enemies in this passageway. So when we picked up on that session, that's where we left off, and the party decided, of who was there. I just kind of role played Lance and Edmund, like following along the rest of the party, and they thought about, well, should we go back, go to the other path that went straight in the entrance room just after the cave entrance, or should we continue down this path? So they decided, all right, let's keep going this way, continue down the hall that we're already in. And so they came into another room, which was there was a pit in the middle of the room, and to the left there was a table with like food scraps on it. But in the pit there was a white wolf, a very large wolf, and sort of to the right of the pit, and in the middle of the pit there was a like fence, like built like with wood, just sort of wedged into the middle of the pit, and on the other side there was just empty space, and then on the right there was the wolf and a pup. The wolf had a pup, and so Althea the ranger was like, "Oh my god, I'm level 3 now. I can be a beastmaster. I'm gonna tame that wolf." So that ended up taking like, I don't know, easily a half hour, if not an hour. I can't remember exactly how long, but basically she was trying to tame the wolf and just rolling poorly. The wolf was rolling very well, and so she ended up getting pretty beat up by the wolf, and so she had to spend. I actually had Lance. She got knocked unconscious, and I had Lance just jump down and grab Althea and jump out of the pit so that the wolf wouldn't kill her. So while that was going on, Aaron decided he didn't want to have anything to do with this. Alexander the wizard just watched as Althea was trying to tame this wolf. Edmund was just doing his own thing. I think he started going over to the table with the scraps on it, and there was the stack of crates and like provisions next to the table. So he just started unpacking the crates and getting food provisions out, and he started laying out a meal for himself while this was going on. And Aaron, he just decided to leave, and he said, "I'm just gonna go back through that passage and then go to the one that we haven't explored yet because I want to see what's over there." So he goes off alone. So what he comes to is like he goes on the passage that was going straight ahead, and it opens up into this grand doorway, and there's like a few steps leading up to the doorway. It's about over 10 feet high. The door, it's like 8 feet wide, and on the door is engravings. It looks like a bunch of people holding up a palace, and on the highest tower of the palace is perched a dragon, and on the dragon's back, this is the carving in the stone door, there is a man, and he has like two palms like out like this, like that, and in his right hand is the sun, and on his left is the moon, and inscribed at the bottom of the door is something, but Aaron can't read it because it's not any of the common languages that he knows. So while he's trying to just figure out what that means, he does a perception check and sees that there's two arrow slits on either side of the doors. And so he figures, all right, maybe more orcs are hiding behind those arrow slits. Oh, and by the way, when he got back to the entrance room before he turned down this passage that he went to, he saw that the orcs that he left unconscious, that you guys left unconscious, and the one who you just left after interrogating and just sort of left him there by himself, they were both gone. And then there was, of course, the other dead orc bodies still there. So Aaron made note of that. And so he surveys the room with have him do a perception check, because he wanted to, be sure that there weren't any traps, and he also noticed the arrow slits when he walked in. So he didn't see any other traps, so he starts walking forward kind of hesitantly, and he said he wanted to grab his backpack and use his shield as use his backpack for a little extra cover on his exposed side towards one of the arrow slits. And I was like, okay, you know what? That's kind of creative. So I gave him a temporary +2 bonus just for this time to his AC. So he walks forward trepidatiously. And of course, arrows fire out of the arrow slits because behind them, orc archers are hiding. And they start shouting at him and firing arrows. He's like, well, crap. I guess I'll just, have to retreat, or he's still kind of figuring out what to do, is if he should stay and try to figure out the riddle, which it probably is inscribed on the bottom of the door, or whether he should go back to get the rest of the party. So back with the party, Althaea finally tames the wolf and the pup that she wanted so badly. And the wolf is very indignant about being tamed. It's like she was having such a hard time taming it because it had been raised by orcs and trained by them, and the wolf could just smell orc blood on the party members who were there because of being in that orc fight earlier, and the wolf just really had a hard time submitting to Althea's will, but eventually she did. And Althaea asked if the wolf had a name, and the wolf said, yes, my name is Snow. And then Althaea asks if the wolf pup had a name, and the pup said, the pup didn't speak. Like, they had kind of a telepathic understanding with Althea, one of Althea's ranger spells. And the wolf said that her pup has not been given a name yet, because it didn't get the chance to, implying that because the party came in and killed the orc sentries, that perhaps her pup would have gotten a name if their masters hadn't been slain. So she was very indignant. And so after that, the party does head back to the entrance room and takes the other passage toward where Aaron is. And they meet up. Aaron's being shot at by arrows. And so Alexander the Wizard, and I just had Edmund stay back in the wolf chamber and just keep eating at the table, to sort of have him, so I wouldn't have to keep role playing him for the time being. Lance is still kind of following along with the party, and so Aaron's being shot at with these arrows from the arrow slits, and the Alexander casts magical darkness with his arcane focus, which is his pipe, and it sort of brings a shroud of darkness over the party, so the orcs will have disadvantage to shoot them from the arrow slits. And so they walk closer to the door, and they all kind of roll history checks to see if they can recognize this ancient language on the door. Althea kind of sticks her head out, and so does of the darkness, to try to see if she can decipher it. And this takes quite a while. They get kind of low rolls on their history checks, so they kind of have to wait till they can figure out if they know this language. Eventually, Althea does figure out the language, and the passage on the door is indeed a riddle. And so I believe what it said was, what breaks and does not fall. And while Althea was reading this riddle, Aaron decided to sneak out of the magical darkness and like go up against the wall near one of the arrow slits and like try to like go up to one of the arrow slits and like get a quick stab or something. He was trying to like get a pull a fast one on the orc that was behind one of the arrow slits. But as he was about to do that, the door opens, because Althea, the ranger, says, "Oh, dawn?" Assuming that this is a riddle, and she was correct. As soon as she says dawn, the door, you can hear gearworks in the stone doors, and they start opening out toward them. And so Aaron just sort of looks back toward the party at the door, and he says, "Oh, okay." And he lights a torch, and he just decides to throw the torch in the arrow slit where the orc is to see if he could get lucky, try to catch him on fire or something. But the orc just kind of yells at him, and he doesn't really know what happened to the orc behind the arrow slit, because he didn't really check. And so then Aaron just runs back toward the party to get back in the cloud of darkness while these arrows are whizzing past him, and he didn't get hit. The orcs rolled very low. So they get into this new room, and in this room is a massive chasm, about 10 feet into the room, and across it is this rope bridge. And the chasm extends out so far that even those with dark vision can't see how far it goes into the darkness. I believe at that point, because we didn't have any elves with the party, we had a half-elf, so I believe she could see 60 feet. So the bridge extended beyond 60 feet. They couldn't see the other side. But by this point, Alexander, he dispels the magical darkness because the arrows can't reach the party now from the other side of the doors. It's because of the angle. So he decides to cast light so he can see at least. Because, some of the other party members have dark vision, but Aaron, I believe, and Alexander don't, because they're human. And another thing to note is that on either side of them in this new room with the bridge are just 2 flat walls on their side. And so when Alexander casts light, I think he put it on his hat or something, all of a sudden arrows fire out of the darkness, like a hail of arrows out of the darkness in the direction of the bridge, like from the other side of the bridge or on the bridge. Arrows fly towards the party. And so I believe someone may have gotten hit, got a few hit points taken down, but they're like, okay, well, we can't see what's on the other side. And like, are they orcs maybe? Like, how can they see us if we can't see, if those of us with dark vision can't see them? And they kind of figured out that they can't see the other side because they're not carrying a light source over there, but Alexander has light on his hat. So that's how they can see, like a beacon of light from their side of the bridge. They can see to the other side because they see that his hat is lit up. And so it extends like a range of 30 feet of bright light and another 20 feet, I believe, of dim light. So their whole party on their side of the bridge is lit up, so whatever's on the other side can see them because of their light source. So they're being shot at with hails of arrows. And so, like, well, what do we do? They're trying to figure out, and they examine the bridge, and it looks like this rope bridge was like replacing another bridge. Like, they saw the remnants of like a stone bridge that had been broken out at some point, and so the rope bridge was kind of a replacement for that, it looked like. And so it's a rope bridge with like wooden pallets, like, to make up the floor of the bridge. And they notice that, well, I mean, if we start going across the bridge, whatever's on the other side might cut it. And so they start debating what to do. And while they're doing this, the two flat walls on either side of them slide open, and two orcs come running out at them with great axes. And they kind of figure out that the orcs behind the arrow slits had used these secret passages behind the doors of the walls. So that's where they were coming from. They must have came from where the arrow slits were in the previous room. So these orcs are charging them. So now they have to deal with these two orcs fighting on their side of the bridge in melee, and then whatever's on the other side firing arrows at them. And so they have some trouble. They're like debating whether they should cross or stay and fight the two orcs first. And so they decide like not to cross the bridge, try to cross the bridge yet. They're kind of defeat the two orcs in close range first on their side, and then see about crossing the bridge. With much trouble and tribulation, they do eventually defeat the orcs on their side. At one point, one of the orcs misses so badly that one of the characters ducks, and the orc swings so hard that he flings his great axe into the chasm. That was pretty cool. And so, yeah, they eventually Aaron tries to like negotiate with one of the orcs on their side a little bit. He's like, "Hey, what? Are you sure you want to be fighting? Like, can't you just take us to your chieftain? Like, I want to talk." And the orcs, like, Aaron rolled persuasion. Unfortunately, he failed. So the orc was having none of it, and eventually Aaron just killed him and like pushed him off into the chasm. Or he did that to one of the orcs. I can't remember if it was the one he was negotiating with. So after that, also Aaron had an idea of like holding onto the bridge and then cutting it so that he would swing over on the rope bridge. And so like the rest of the party kind of argued against that, and they're like, well, maybe that's not such a good idea because we don't know how far this rope bridge is and how easy it will be to cross this chasm if you do cut it. So maybe that's not such a good idea. I think part of that was my fault because maybe I wasn't as good at describing how long this bridge looked, because he thought it ended at 60 feet. Thomas did, who was playing Aaron, but the bridge did not end at 60 feet. It just continued into darkness after a range of 60 feet. So they really didn't know how long this bridge was, extending into the darkness. And at one point, so Althaea starts shooting over the chasm. And first, she has Alexander the wizard cast light on one of her arrows, so she can fire it over the chasm and try to get an idea of how wide this chasm is and how far the bridge goes. So she fires the arrow over. It kind of illuminates a section of the cavern and goes over to the other side and clatters off the wall on the other side. And she can see that illuminated for just a second are like the shapes and figures, and they can hear them shouting now at this point at having this light arrow fly at them. They sound like orcs, and their silhouettes are kind of orc-like, so they kind of figure out there must be like around 4 to 6 maybe orcs on the other side of the bridge with bows firing at them. And they can estimate from Althea's light arrow that this bridge is probably 150 feet long. So just enough range to not have disadvantage with a longbow. And so they figure that out, but they're still not quite sure what to do. And so as they're debating, I believe they're getting hit with more arrows. And so eventually they're just so depleted on hit points at this point, about having 6 orcs shoot at them with these longbows, that Alexander warns the party that, hey, we should retreat. Perhaps we should go into one of those secret rooms that one of the orcs came out of. And so the rest of the party agrees, and they start running over, with Althea's wolf and her pup in tow, who luckily didn't get shot by any of the arrows. And Lance, at the beginning of this combat, said, you know what? I just had him say, you know what? On second thought, I'm just gonna run back and stay with Edmund. So I had Lance just kind of run back and not join the fight, because I didn't really want to, take a lot of action for Lance, because it's Logan's character, and I don't know, it probably would have been safe enough to have him in the fight. Thought that would have been fine, but I just felt like, well, I'll just have him stay out because, Logan's not here. It's his character, so I'll just have him, kind of stay out of the session while he's not here. So they run over to one of the secret rooms, and the secret doors are still slid open in the stone wall. And so just as they get there, Aaron gets hit in the back with an arrow, and he's end-capped. And then Althea gets end-capped as well, a few feet from the secret door. So they drag Althaea inside, and Alexander's like the only humanoid that's conscious, right? The wolf and her pup are conscious, and they run inside. But Alexander, he makes sure to grab Althea, put her inside the secret room, make sure Aaron gets inside, and so he starts feeling around the wall to see if he can close the door, because there's arrows clattering and hitting the wall just right outside of the secret room, and it's not so secret anymore. And the arrows are just hitting the floor and nearly getting inside because of the angle. The orcs are having a hard time quite getting through the secret door with their arrows, but they're getting close. Some of the arrows barely make it inside the room, and so Alexander starts feeling around the walls. I have him make an investigation check to try to find the mechanism which closes the door to the room. So he eventually does. One of the flagstones, like in the wall, he eventually finds one that presses in, and the stone door goes and just sort of slides closed. And so okay, we're safe for now. And so Alexander, he takes some health potions off of Althaea, because it was lucky enough that she had some, and so instead of stabilizing them, he just gives them both health potions, and they wake up. And so they're just like, wow, that was kind of difficult. Alexander thinks that he should maybe send Sir Herbert, his frog, to go get Lance and Edmund, who are assuming that they're both in the wolf chamber, back in the other passageway, way before the door room with the puzzle, or the riddle. And so as Alexander the Wizard was about to send Sir Herbert out of the secret room to try to get past the orc arrows and get Lance and Edmund, we capped it off there. So now we're caught up with the session before last session, and now I'll just do a recap of the last session.